Most guests join the show from a studio or an office, but you spend more time underground, underwater, and inside active volcanoes. That's most people spend at the gym.
Yeah, that sounds like I'm trying to escape humanity in some ways. It's not. It's not necessarily that. I just love being out in nature, doing weird, wonderful, and cool stuff.
Fantastic. Can't wait to explore that. The following is a conversation with Chris Barron, an award winning documentary filmmaker and host of No Ordinary Monday. Chris has built a life and a career exploring truth and leadership in the world's most extreme conditions. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensala. Today, we explore the human side of risk, calculated ones, of course, sharing stories of survival, decision making, and meaning that go beyond the ordinary. To support our show, please check the episode description. Chris, welcome to the show.
Sid, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
From molecular microbiology to minefields and microphones. That's not your typical LinkedIn profile. I want to explore all of that today. But let's start from the beginning. What drove you to leave the lab and step into storytelling?
Well, I've always been interested in science since I was maybe very young, but particularly at school, as always happens, there's always a teacher at school that kind of sparks something in you, and it was my biology teacher. So basically, I kind of I got into science and did science university. I loved it. I did a forensic biology undergraduate degree.
Mhm.
So I was trying to get into criminology, and I don't know if you remember the show CSI at the
Yeah,
time, big
quite
TV
famous.
show.
Yeah.
CSI was big, and I was like, hey, that looks like a fun job. So I was like forensic biology, and then I realized that it was not that part of science that I was interested in. The part was more. I mean, that's basically just being in a lab and then putting some blood spots in a robot and getting a result and standing up in court and reading it. And I was like, there's no exploration, there's no creativity here for me. And so I did a master's in molecular microbiology, which was one step towards that sort of like more exploration side of things. And I essentially tried to get a job. I was like, whether it was a PhD or a job in the industry, and I ended up in scientific sales. Essentially selling consumable equipment, whether equipment or consumables to labs all over the country. And after about 9 months of that, I was 23 at this point, and after about 9 months, I realized that sales targets, budgets, profit wasn't really exciting me either. So I had a real sort of crisis moment after, I guess, 3 months in this job. It was, they have these big sales meetings every quarter and all that kind of stuff. And where they stand up in a big, the Hilton conference room, and there's, 1,000 people in there, and they put spreadsheets on the wall and tell each team how great they're doing, how much money they made. And I just went back to my hotel room that night at 10 o'clock at night, and I went, I cannot do this for the next 40 or 50 years of my life. And so I sat on the edge of my bed, and I kind of was like, okay, just break down your life. What would you be passionate doing for the rest of your life? And I said, I still love science. That's still something I really want to be part of. And I love photography. And I literally sat in my bed and Googled, what if I like science and I like photography, what kind of jobs can I do? And an advert for the BBC in Scotland came up. Their science department was looking for an intern. And I was like, that sounds like it could be fun. And so I sort of just, that evening, just quickly threw an application, threw my CV at it. And a week later, they said, yeah, you want to come and be an intern at the BBC for 4 weeks?
Fantastic. Yeah, yeah. How does that scientific training continue to influence the way you approach story and risk?
I guess, I mean, science is always at the heart of it. Science is curiosity, It's being curious about the world. And I think the reason that I was really excited to get into science was I felt like I could make a tangible impact on the world. And the reason I thought that was because there was a show called Wonders of the Solar System with Professor Brian Cox. It was big in the BBC at the time. And there was some news article I'd read that said there was like a 9 or 10% increase after that show had aired of people going into the sciences in university. And I, being passionate about science, I think everybody should be interested in science, how the way the world works and everything. And I thought, great, if I can do that, then that's what I want to do. And it's essentially, using science and storytelling to get people that aren't interested in it to become interested in it. And we use this term in science TV all the time, which is sort of Trojan science or Trojan storytelling. It's that idea of like packaging a scientific concept or some scientific lesson or nugget inside something that's entertaining or whatever, to try and get all audiences interested.
Yeah. Chris, how did working as a runner teach you that you still depend on today?
Well, being a runner, I mean, for those of your listeners who might not be aware, a runner is the very lowest rung on the ladder of television. It's entry level, you're one step above intern basically, and it's getting lunches and teas and coffees and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's a highly important job because you're able to observe all of these other people in the team doing what they do. So I think, being a runner, it's a great job because you learn all aspects of the industry. You can watch the producers, you can watch the directors, you can watch the cameramen, the soundmen, and go, I'm still early enough in my career. I can choose which one of these things that I could fit into, because television is a huge industry, and you can do whatever you want to do within it. So a runner is the lowest level of the TV ladder, one step above intern. And it's great because you're kind of there, and there's not the stakes, like the whole shoot isn't riding on your back. So you can kind of sit there, and it's a difficult job because you got to run around and make sure the shoot's all running smoothly. But, there's obvious lessons. I mean, the obvious lessons for me were if you're on time, you're late. That's something that I drill into my junior staff all the time. If the call time is 7 a.m., you should be there at 6:50 or earlier, because these shoots are basically, when you're on the shoot, you're burning money. In terms of throughout my career, the deeper lessons that I've learned being a runner is just the inherent unpredictability of any shoot. You can make plans of A, B, C, and D, and anything can happen that will wipe all of those plans off the table, and you've got to scramble to figure out how you're going to deliver this shoot, even when you're having things that you never even foreseen happening to you.
Yeah. As a runner, basically, you there watching everything unfolding or happening in real time. You observe, you notice things. Do you have time to ask questions or?
You mean of the other crew?
Yeah.
You mean like the members of the crew? Yeah, I mean, I certainly. Obviously, when you're in the thick of it, you're filming stuff. Definitely not. Whenever the camera's rolling, you're silent, and you're just making sure that everything behind the scenes is running smoothly. So when they're rolling, you're making sure that lunch is ready or whatever needs to happen. But of course, like there's downtime. The big thing about television is it's kind of like the military, which is hurry up and wait. It's basically there's lots of times where you're just sitting there. So I said I love photography, so I would kind of tend to drift towards the cameraman and be like, hey, so what camera is that? What lens are you using? How does this work? And I would just inherently annoy them. But they love, these people are all so passionate about their jobs that they're so excited when a young person comes up and goes, this is cool. And ultimately what happens if, I was on shoots and they would be like, there's like low level shots that you need to get sometimes called general views or GVs or B-roll if you're in America. Like if you're watching a daytime show, there's just a shot of a flower pull focus or some people walking in the street, and we would go out and spend, a couple hours doing that. And the cameraman would be like, hey, Chris, do you want to shoot a few shots? I'd be like, yeah. So I would jump on the camera and just rack a few shots. And while I'm doing it, he's sort of saying like, hold that shot a little bit longer. This is what they need in the edit. So I'm learning this whole time. And for them, they do this stuff all the time. So if it's low scale stuff, they're like, oh, Chris can do it.
Yeah. When did you first feel the sense of ownership over the story being told?
That's an interesting question because, I guess one step above runner is in documentary television is you have a researcher.
Mhm.
And a researcher's job is to, my first job was making a show about, superhuman abilities, whether they're climbers or, tightrope walkers. And so your job is to find the stories, find the people, find the stories. You get told by the higher ups that this is the show we're making. Your job is to find me as many people or as many stories or as many locations to do that. So you don't have the ownership, but you're kind of like, oh, hey, I found a great story. But it's not until a little bit later, maybe like 6 or 7 years into my career when I was a producer, again, not directing yet, but I was a producer. And it's that difference between just gathering the elements, whether it's the characters, and just going, oh, great, I found all these elements here, Mr. Senior Person, go and figure out what to do with them. The next level up is conceptualizing an idea. You have all the elements. How do you turn that into something? And I was working on this big science show called One Strange Rock. It was actually the second series of it, and we were in development of the show. And sometimes the way these shows work is that they have big stories. Someone finds something really, really cool. And someone had found this story in Greece where these two towns on an island would and it's been going for hundreds of years, would fire homemade rockets at each other, in one particular evening at nighttime. And the objective is they were trying to hit the other side's church bell, but it was all in good fun. But they spend the entire year making homemade fireworks.
Yeah.
And then this one night they just launch. It's like, and I think it's to commemorate some big battle that happened or whatever. Yeah. So we are all really excited about this story, but no one could find a place to put it within the show. Like, it's a big science show. How do you, what role is this big rocket firework celebration going to have? And so everyone was kind of like, for months, tried. And I think I had a little bit of downtime between tasks I was doing. I was like, I'm going to give this a little bit of time. And essentially I cracked a way of figuring out how to use this story. And it was all about the inherent chaos, like turbulence in science, the idea of unpredictable systems and the way things move through the air. Again, whether it's aircraft or, just the turbulence in water, and how mathematics and systems can really struggle with predicting and calculating the unpredictability of turbulence and chaos, essentially. Yeah. And I thought, great. These rockets firing through the air, we could use slow motion cameras to show the sparks and the air and the airflow and all this kind of stuff. And again, it's that idea of Trojan science. You've wrapped a scientific concept within something that's highly entertaining.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Chris, did you ever encounter you were searching for something, you found a fantastic story, and you're pitching that idea to the producer or whoever take a decision within the TV network? Have you ever encountered that story was killed or stopped because of lack of budget?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, stories are killed all the time for lack of budget, We all, as producers and directors, have huge ambitions to try and bring the audiences the most spectacular thing that they've ever seen in their entire lives. And there's always a huge onus on that. But the irony is that, budgets are shrinking. Yeah. Expectations are getting higher, but budgets are shrinking. So, and not even that. I've had stories killed because of world politics. We were doing a show about, it was a big science show about melting ice around the world and the consequences of that, and people studying. And there was a great story that we found in Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world, in Russia. And we'd planned for ages to do, this shoot. And of course, your listeners are probably already aware what happens, but Russia invades Ukraine. Yeah. And all the US sanctions came down, and all of our hard work for months and months was like, no, because our channel was an American channel, and they had to abide by American law, so we had to scrap the story. Yeah. So it can be pretty heartbreaking sometimes, because months of work, and then you've got to go, and you're leading up to a shoot window, and then suddenly, rather than 2 or 3 months of preparation time, you've got weeks, and so you scramble.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you transition to leading your own productions?
I mean, promotions within television are inherently challenging sometimes. I mean, the notorious one in for me is going from producer to director, being the first time that you get to sort of being handed a whole film and it's your responsibility to deliver that film. But in terms of leading an entire show, because it's kind of like, you as it's like any job, you get given bigger and bigger baskets of responsibility, right? So as a director, you might be a director within a series. So you might be making, one episode within a 6-part series or something like that. And you're part of a team of directors. But the first time I got to sort of lead a show was a few years ago when I was working in Singapore for a company there. We made a show for Curiosity Stream called Evolve. It was a really fun biomimicry show about how, scientists are looking to nature to try and find, clever solutions that might help us, as humans. And so I was a director on this show at the time, but I'd been quite a senior director throughout. I was leading the first episode and been in the company quite a while. And they'd brought in some guy whose job it was to lead the show. But it became pretty apparent after, it's a big show, millions of dollars, a lot on the line. After a couple of months that this guy wasn't sort of like up to the standard that the senior management was expecting. And they basically said, all right, Chris, well, as well as doing the first episode and another episode directing, you're now taking on that person's job as well. So it was like, oh, geez, okay, let's get like a battlefield promotion, like in the thick of it, no time to find someone else. And I was the next best person because I knew the show and had all the conversations with the commissioners and the bosses. So it was like I had it all in my head, but I had to become, helping all the other directors as well as directing my own episode. And so that was a real amazing challenge for me. It was hard. But I also had a great team with me. I had a boss, an exec producer who knew that, this was a battlefield promotion. So it wasn't like any mistakes I made was going to be, catastrophic because they knew the pressure we were under. So it was kind of like I had the benefit of leading the team without all that scrutiny on my head. But we delivered a great show in the end, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. Interesting. While you're telling me that story, I'm thinking about, here we go. They put you in that situation and you need to lead the team, And on that topic, how does leadership look like when you're navigating in a minefield or a volcano?
I mean, all of these things with leadership, luckily, those shows like Evolve I just mentioned, our teams are 25 people, but that's an office-based leadership role. So in that sense, you've got to communicate your vision very clearly across an entire team and make sure they understand the concept and are working efficiently towards a common goal. When you're on location, it's a little bit different because your team is much smaller and the challenges are a bit different. You've got logistical challenges and weather challenges and all these kinds of things. And your team may be less than 5 people. You're cameraman, soundman, producer, director, and maybe, a fixer if you're in a foreign country or something like that. But ultimately, everybody knows that the director is the one who's there. They're the one executing the plan, and that's it. They're the one, ultimately, you're the one that has the responsibility to come back to the office at the end of the day, and they're going to ask the director, i.e. me, did you get it?
Yeah.
They're not going to ask the cameraman, they're not going to ask the soundman, the producer. That's what it is. So basically, everyone knows that is the deal when you're on shoot. So they look to the director and go, okay, what are we doing today? And it's quite easy. There might be on bigger shoots, there might be a lot more egos involved. I know shoots where you've got A-list talent and you've got exec producers, and when you've got 10 to 15 people on shoot, or sometimes there are shoots where there's 100 people, A-list talent come with entourages. That's when the dynamics become really fascinating. You've got huge egos at play, and everyone wants to have their say. And I've only experienced a couple of those times, and luckily I wasn't in the most senior role. I could observe what was going on. I played my part, but that's really difficult when you've got that many people to try and wrangle.
And how typically you run the team? Is it like a sport team, for example, knowing your team members, and here you're talking about the sound specialist, the cameraman, one or two, or several cameramans, etc., etc. So how do you run the team? Is it briefing, debriefing? How do you do it?
That's a very good question, and essentially, yes, it is essentially run as imagine like a football team. You have different people that have different roles, different specialities, different skill sets. You would never, and you have to rely on those people to do the job that you've employed them to do or hired them to do. You would never put a goalkeeper as a striker because they could probably do it, but they're not the best person to do it. So I think, for me, I guess it's leading them in a way that it's going to be a balance between your own confidence. You have to show them that this is the vision, and they all have their own egos in the same way. They all want to show that they're doing a good job. It's trying to find a way to get them all to shine and put their imprint on the show without squashing that sort of because I've seen directors do that before, and I've seen directors literally take the camera out of the cameraman's hands because no, this is not how I want to shoot it. Just give me the camera and I'll do it this way. What that does to the cameraman is basically just gets them to step back. They're no longer invested. They said, okay, if you want to do it like that, that's how you do it. I mean, you basically have to, ensure that each one of the people on your team is motivated and has a morale to do the job that they're there to do and know exactly what's in your mind and how to execute that. And the best way for me to do that is all comes down to very clear communication. I know directors that are very good communicators, and I know directors who struggle with communication, and that happens at all layers of things. I like to over communicate sometimes, so to make sure that there is no room for confusion, because especially on shoots you haven't got time to deliberate or get into something and you're like, that's not what I meant, and you've already started shooting with someone. That's when it's tricky. So we'll usually sit down. I'll send the script, because these camera guys and crew members, typically when they're camera and sound, they may not be on the whole show. They'll just come in for a shoot or two, and they'll maybe even fly in directly from a completely different show. So you've got to sit them down and go, great, here's what we want to do. I'll sometimes have storyboards if it's that level of shoot, so they can very clearly understand what we're doing. And essentially, if we need to sort of calibrate as we go through the story and the shoot days, that's what we do. But that's why, coming down to the sports analogy, people often like working with people that they've worked with before and they know that they gel with really well, because it just cuts that miscommunication risk in half often.
And when you're shooting in places like volcanoes or minefield, how do you evaluate risk for yourself and your team?
I mean, when we're on those kind of high risk shoots, shall we say, we have fantastic risk assessment teams. It doesn't matter if I'm filming in an office or if I'm filming in a volcano, we do a risk assessment no matter what. And that risk assessment, obviously, for an office is a little bit shorter than it might be for a volcano. I remember writing the risk assessment for the volcano that we shot in, and we had to sort of I don't know if we came up with a new section, but it was basically like a lava section. And risk of lava, what to do if a crew member gets hit with lava or whatever it might be. And it was quite amusing. I was sitting with a production manager going, this is quite bizarre, going to volcano. So we do risk assessments where we try and in advance we'll sit in the office and try and think about every single thing that could go wrong and then put in place mitigation strategies, which basically, we don't have to think about it on the ground. It's like, great, we know that if this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that. So it's doing all that preparation. But we also have great safety teams. It's people basically to watch our back when we're got our head down the monitor, head down the camera, to make sure that that there isn't any risks that we're going to step back and step into a crevasse or a volcano or whatever. So we rely on those guys a lot as well to take the pressure off.
Yeah. When you are on a documentary project, Chris, how do you train yourself to see what others miss?
I mean, I guess that's an interesting question. In terms of visually or from a story perspective?
I think from both, because the way I look at it, and I don't claim I have experience, but I worked with so many during my sporting career, trying to do a documentary or let's say a feature, post-production feature on a specific team or specific topic within that event itself. And as, let's say, someone running the show, I give kind of clear brief to the producer or what we want to achieve or what's the purpose of the project. And I see that person immersing themselves into this creative or this kind of sphere where there is so much creativity, in terms of creating content, the story. I'm always fascinated by what a producer does, he or she, that others they don't see from a creative standpoint.
Yeah, creativity is fascinating. I don't proclaim myself to be, I guess I am a creative person, but as I said before, I'm a scientist at heart,
Which is a plus,
I
I
like
guess.
making, which can be a plus, but I have worked with people that are, as you say, they're bursting with creativity. But for me, like, I think it is, you get onto the ground and you can plan all you want, but you don't know exactly how everything's going to run and what's going to be presented to you until you're on the ground. And then I think it becomes a really, for me, it becomes a case of very illogical. Like, I know the puzzle pieces that I have to collect from this shoot in order to deliver a successful story. And it's not like a literal puzzle piece. It's like a 5-dimensional puzzle because you can connect the dots in a million different ways. I could approach a shoot and another producer could approach a shoot and we would produce 2 entirely different stories. With the same characters, the same locations and all that kind of stuff, but it would have a very different feel. Yeah. And I think for me, it's an instinctual thing, it comes from a mixture between your instinct and you go, oh, I can see the connection between that. If we get a shot of this and use this character here, we can then use that to do X, Y, and Z to get us to the next part of the story. But I think the key thing for me is really interesting is when you have to shortcut the story sometimes and let's say you have 3 days, you allocated 3 days to shoot a story, but for whatever reason, somebody doesn't turn up or you lose a day shooting. That's when the creativity for me gets into overdrive because all your plans go out the window and you've got to get your beginning, your middle and end and a very good story because you can't just put your hands up and go, okay, we go home now. Yeah. That's not an acceptable answer when you get back to the office. So you have to sit down and go, okay, great. We've got this, we've got that, we've already got those 2 pieces. How do we fill the gap or how do we fill the missing pieces of the puzzles with the elements that we have? And for me, it's a problem solving exercise. And I find that's when I get really excited on a shoot because you kind of go, this is what we have, this is what we do have to achieve. How can we work together to find a way through this particular problem? And that's what I love about filmmaking because you could have the best laid plans, a best shot list in the world, but actually sometimes the magic comes from going off script.
Fantastic. Have you ever misread the situation? And if yes, how did it affect the story?
You mean misread in a sense of a character or a scenario?
Maybe from a scenario standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, misreading a situation, I said we do a lot of planning when we go into this stuff. So the whole idea is to not be in a situation where you've misread something. Like I think that I wouldn't be a good producer if I went to something and was like, okay, I completely misread this. I'm sorry. But I think that there probably are times when, it's really unexpected situations that I'm trying to think of any scenarios where it's been misread. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think that's the thing. It's kind of like maybe actually the only thing that would be a misread situation is when we do foreign language work. A lot can get lost in translation because you're dealing with an interpreter who is working with someone who speaks a completely different language and probably from a completely different culture to you. And if they're not communicating a situation or communicating not just what that person's saying, but what that person means with what they're saying, that's when the real problems can happen. And that comes from, oh, this person says they're available this time and they'll be there. And then you go, great. And being from a television part of the world and, being from the Western part of the world, thinking, great, that person will be there at 8:00 tomorrow morning. But in actual fact, in certain parts of the world, that probably means there's a 50% chance they'll be there. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And if they don't, then you've got to be prepared to roll with that person's schedule. And that's happened to me several times where you've kind of relied on the fixer to go, or the translator, the interpreter, to go, great, have we got that person locked in? And they go, yes, that person says they'll be there. And to us, that's like, great, we're locked in. In a lot of parts of the world, that's not necessarily the case. And then you've got to find another person, or you got to work with it.
Yeah. I need to ask you this. Basically, in this business, you have consumer, which is your audience. Yeah. Now, when you start a project from the beginning to when you finish and you're ready to release the documentary or a film, do you always think about the audience or no? In terms of perception, reaction?
That's a very interesting question, because for me, the immediate thought is yes, absolutely. Like, if your intention is to, that's the end user, I think that's who you need to be thinking about at all times when you're making a documentary. That's in an ideal world. Sometimes you've got half a mind on your commissioner. I guess that's sort of indirectly saying that's the audience, because it's the commissioner's job. Let's say it's the National Geographic Commissioner or the BBC. Their job is the ones to be like, this is what our audience wants. This is what we want to present them. This is what they know that they want. So you kind of have to then, through interpretation of them going, audience is interested in this. And you've spent months and months and months conceptualizing a show because the BBC wants a show that talks about neuroscience or whatever it might be, or wildlife. So you've always got the audience in mind, but it's through the filter of the channel, making sure that, great, this is for a National Geographic audience. What does that mean? So it's kind of like, it's a very muddled way of saying it, but yes, you are thinking about your audiences, but it's through the filter of the various channels that you're working for. So a Nat Geo audience would have a particular expectation, a Discovery audience would have a particular expectation, Netflix, BBC, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And as a director, producer, how do you measure success?
Ooh, success for me is, wow. Get very philosophical here for a moment. Because
so you start a project, you achieve that project within a budget. We like it, we don't like it. We always have to work with the budget, There was no, let's say, unforeseen issues within that project itself. You're happy with the product. It's launched, distributed, watched. From a personal standpoint, how do you measure success? What makes you happy?
What makes me happy is if I watch a show and I really enjoy it. Every single part of it is like, I can enjoy a show as a consumer. And it doesn't always happen because I think as a filmmaker, you've always got to make compromises to your work along the way, whether it's compromises for budget, as you say, or for someone else's vision, or for whatever it might be. But if I can get to the end of a project and sit down and watch it and kind of get lost in it and just enjoy it as a piece of work, and I've like, this is something I'm very proud of. It doesn't matter whether it's done well. It's obviously a nice bonus if it's successful and has awards and has great viewing figures and we get a second season and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm most happy when I can sit down and watch a show and even if I can sit and watch my friends and family, and they're the ones their eyes are going wide and going, oh my God, how did you achieve this, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a more intimate thing for me when I watch a film.
Yeah. What's your personal practical definition of resilience?
I mean, resilience is all about failure and dealing with failure. And I think that resilience, it's something that you need to train with over time. And I think for me, it's not about going, why is this happening? It's kind of like, okay, great. I can see this as an opportunity. Don't worry about the fact that it's happening. How do we punch through it? And having the ability to change your
Hmm.
mindset, to see failure not as like another hit to the stomach or hit to the face, but as an opportunity to learn and to
Hmm.
grow. And there's been multiple times where I've faced difficult times and failed at certain things, and I haven't always been resilient. I think that's something that I've learned to grow with over time throughout my career. I think the more times that you fail, the actually, ironically, the more resilient you can become, as long as you can think about it in the right way. You think about failures. Okay, great, that didn't work, or I didn't do that well, but that's something I can improve upon because next time it happens, it's not gonna happen again.
Hmm. Hmm. You mentioned you're attracted to what frightens you. Why?
I always, I mean, to put it literally, I love horror. In some ways, like I love horror films. I've always had an excited feeling when I watch horror
Yeah.
films. That's not to say I'm not scared by it. I am scared by horror films, but I find it exciting. I find it exhilarating. I find it a challenge in some cases. And I think the same applies to things that are scary,
Mhm.
and that's also difficult because some people might find going into a volcano scary or climbing into a cave and living inside a week scary. I find those things thrilling. I don't find those things scary necessarily. I think it's more it's something that again it's exciting. I think I have a friend who you know would who hates horror films, and the effect that it has on her is like a real sort of like depressive kind of thing. Like it's a real sort of like barrier to her. And I find it the opposite actually. And I think it's just the way sometimes that your brain can be wired just changes the way that you approach fear, things that scare you, whether you are drawn towards it or you're repelled
Mhm.
away. But I've always tend to be drawn towards things that are a bit scary.
Yeah, interesting. I never liked horror movie, not because of fear. They have no effect on me at all, at all. And my friends, they keep telling me, or my family, I have my two boys, they love horror films, and they try to push me to come and watch. It's just something that never clicked with me. There is no effect whatsoever. Sorry for the audience, but I find it a complete waste of time. Sorry. That's me.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. I find horror films a really fascinating human experience. The
Mhm.
way that different people react, because obviously, action films and romantic films, like everyone tends to have a
Yeah.
similar kind of reaction. Horror films brings out such a different instinct in people, and whether, like I say, you find them boring and you're like, meh, this isn't even scary,
Yeah.
or
It's
whatever,
not
it just doesn't
even
affect you.
boring. It's I don't know. Chris, I really don't know. I tried. I really tried in the past with friends when there is a new film that is showing on the cinema. Come and see it. Let's book. Come with us. And I just say no because there is no effect whatsoever. You know, it's I don't know. I
Wow.
don't like the maybe I don't like the story or
Mm.
yeah. Look, beside of all the effects, maybe things I liked in the past, Alfred Hitchcock films, which is time to time, because I have quite a good collection. My wife and I, we have a good collection of moving cassettes and DVDs and Blu-rays. God, and the people they keep telling us, you need to get rid of the. I said no, we've been collecting the stuff for ages, And but horror movies, man, it's yeah, maybe one
But
day.
it's a quick question for you then. But if you were put in a situation of one of these horror films, let's say you're, I don't know, in a scary forest or in a scenario, it's still you. Maybe it's
No,
just maybe it's
I'm a
just your reaction to
person
fear.
that never gets scared. Nothing scares me.
Wow,
Nothing, absolutely nothing scares me. Believe it or not,
wow.
Chris,
It
it's
is.
Yeah, nothing.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing for you, though?
I think it's good. Look, I did so. Yeah, when it comes to extreme sport, I did so many extreme sports. When I was little, I always come home, cuts everywhere. But from a fear standpoint, and I was lucky. I was lucky in many, many occasions. But we go camping in the forest and stuff like that. Never get scared. Never, ever. Not scared of
Wow.
dark. No, yeah,
I mean, lucky. It's a good trait to have.
yeah,
Yeah.
can get it.
It's,
You know,
maybe it's you got a different upbringing.
don't know.
But again, it's not even just the fact that people get scared; it's how they deal with fear.
Mm,
And I think that's the interesting thing, is because you can be scared. I'm
mm,
scared. I get scared at stuff, but it doesn't always stop me. I'm kind of like, if something is scary, and I'm kind of like, well, it doesn't. It would be great to overcome it. Especially I've always been quite a competitive person,
mhm.
um, and I've seen other people that might go and look at something. I don't know, going on the top of a cliff or climbing or going underwater into caves. If people are like, oh, there's no way I would ever do that. You couldn't pay me to do that. I'm kind of like, I think I might give that a try. And just because there's maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe if I went and did it, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I think I like that feeling. So maybe that says something about me.
Yeah, yeah. And all that talking about scary stuff and things. Can you tell the difference between helpful fear and harmful fear?
I mean, simple answer is just harmful or destructive fear is something that just holds you back. You become non-functional. I have seen that with people on some of these shoots that are in a situation where they are overcome with fear, and become unable to perform their
Mm,
duties. So I think obviously it's rare, because you don't typically get on these shoots unless people are confident that you can perform your duties under the conditions that are expected. Um, but I think when it comes to helpful fear, I actually think fear is a very useful tool. I think fear can sharpen you.
mm,
It can actually bring out the best in your mind. You can access that flow state, a lot easier, where your mind is performing a lot sharper. You can solve problems faster. You can do things more efficiently when you're in kind of that semi-fear state, or that heightened state of arousal. So I think that it can be very useful sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Let's shift gear and talk about your podcast, No Ordinary Monday. What did you start the podcast, and what makes an episode worth doing for you?
I mean, as I've been in filmmaking for 15 years or
Mm,
so, and during that time, I cannot count the amount of fascinating people that I've had the chance to work with. It's my job, throughout this whole time, is to find and interview and bring these people to audiences, either to help explain scientific concepts or bring their own stories to it. And what I found a lot of the time is that we would do a let's say about neuroscience, or it could even be a crew member. We work with lots of safety guys who are climbers and have done weird and wonderful stuff. You know, these people's stories are often not told. And I would be sitting around a campfire, at nighttime in an expedition, and they would be telling these stories where, like, everyone around the fires, their minds are being blown about what this person does for a living. And I'm like, and at some point, like recently, I was like, okay, this has got to be a podcast. These stories are way too cool not to share with people. And I think what I love about this is it doesn't just bring these true human stories to
mm,
audiences. They're also inspirational. A lot of people out there, myself included, when I was in my early 20s, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
yeah.
And I kind of thought, if I can bring these stories out there, most people just love listening to them, because I've got everyone from, like, people surviving plane crashes to people that have been firefighters and people that work in the death industry, who've all got these amazing stories from what they've dedicated their lives to do. But also, like, if people can, it doesn't matter if they're 17 or 47,
Hmm.
who are kind of like figuring out, if you're 17, you're trying to figure out what you want to do for your life, or if you're 47 and you're kind of in a point where you're like, oh, I've always wanted to be X, I always wanted to know what that's like. And so it can be inspirational for those people to get a behind the scenes look at these various careers, and get a really true, realistic insight. And it's not all sugar coated, a lot of these stories are, like these jobs can be tough, but they are hugely rewarding. And for people that do them, they clearly think either the risk is worth the reward or the danger to their life or to their safety is worth it.
And listening and sharing those stories, is there a conversation on the show that changed your mind or stayed with you?
Oh, geez. A couple. Actually, all of them are. I'm going to say that they're all great, but there's one that I really enjoyed. I'll tell you about a couple actually because they're slightly different. The first person I interviewed was actually my uncle for the show, and he was kind of one of the reasons that the show is the way it is, because he was a trauma nurse in Scotland, and he was part of a group called Medic One, which is basically a emergency first response unit, essentially bringing the hospital to the patient when they can't be moved to the hospital. And he was essentially the first person, or one of the first teams on the scene at the Lockerbie bombing in Scotland. Okay. And so he told me this story years ago once, when I met him in Scotland and we were out for a beer or whatever. And I didn't realize that he had done this. And he told me the story. And I was just like, jaw dropped. I was just like, this is an incredible story. And how he arrived there and what he saw. And I guess for younger listeners, the Lockerbie bombing was a terrorist bombing of an aircraft flying from the UK to New York, I think it was, that essentially blew up with a bomb over Scotland. And the town of Lockerbie was where a lot of the debris fell. And there were 0 survivors. And so my uncle describes his experiences going through it. And even retelling it for the podcast, my jaws dropped at some of these, what his experience was like, and just realizing that what it took to get through that, but also the build up to it, the skills that he required to be in that position at that particular time. So I think that's a really resonant story with me because it kind of, is so vivid and so detailed, and helped trigger, me making this podcast, among other things. The other one is a great interview I did with a death anthropologist who works in Australia, who basically studies death rituals, across the world. Sure. And just the way that, because she works with a lot of death industry professionals, and people that work with death day in, day out. And just the way that we all think of death as taboo is something we do not want to talk about ever. But there's no reason for it to be a taboo. I know we're all scared of it, or some people are scared of it.
I'm not.
But, well, there you go. You're not scared of everything. But I think just listening to her and the way that she sort of, talks about how, we all need to talk about death, just make it, just talk about it more. There's no reason to be scared of it. And actually, the more we talk about, the less scared we become of it, and the more prepared we can be for when our loved ones pass. We know exactly what they want. When they do pass away, there's no ambiguity about, do they want to be buried or cremated or something else? Like, there's less of that stress that goes on if we have the conversation early.
Fascinating. We were talking earlier, and I come back to your podcast. Can you tell us again the story of Interfaith Church that you experienced?
Sure. For listeners, I've just to preface, I've lived all over the world. I was sort of born in Australia, but spent some time growing up in the US. I grew up in Dubai for a little bit, my high school there. Spent time in Scotland doing my university and starting my career there. Spent time in London. Recently moved to Singapore, and now my wife and I live in Indonesia, in a small town called Jogja, on the island of Java. It's a beautiful, beautiful town. It's sort of the cultural heart of Indonesia, or at least of Java, a lot of people say. But it's a fascinating place. I mean, Indonesia is a Muslim country, officially. But in this town, the tourists come here for 2 main reasons. One is a massive Hindu temple, and the other is a massive Buddhist temple, the largest Buddhist temple in the world, called Borobudur, is an hour's drive from my house. So my wife and I, when we first moved here, thought, oh, we'll do some of the tourist sites and whatever. And I think when we were driving in that area, my wife had found, it's quite a relatively well-known tourist spot called the Chicken Church. And we thought, oh, we'll go check this out. It'll be really interesting. And it is literally what you can picture. It is a chicken. It is a large chicken building sitting in the middle of the forest. And it's just a bizarre piece. So we went there and they do a great tour and they explain how the founder, the creator of this church was an Indonesian man walking through the forest, and according to him, God spoke to him and said, you need to build an interfaith church here, right at this spot. Mm-hmm. And so that's what he did. And so when you go into this building, go inside the chicken, the lower levels, the lower levels are all these little alcoves and small little rooms with curtains on them. It's like walking through a cave or something like that. And each of them are just, it doesn't matter what religion you're in, you can go and pray, and do what you need to do. The rest of the building has larger, rooms and stuff as well, and a sort of, you can climb up to the head of the chicken where the crown is. It's actually, he says it's not a chicken. He says actually it's supposed to be a dove, but it looks like a chicken, so everyone calls it a chicken. And you can climb up to the head and where the crown of the chicken is and look out over the beautiful forest and Borobudur. And it's just a very interesting place to find in the middle of the forest there.
Nice. Thanks for sharing, Chris. Thank you.
No problem.
Do you think passion is overrated compared to purpose? The reason I'm asking you this question, because going back to what you said earlier about quitting your scientific career or path and shifting from science to filmmaking.
I mean, for me, passion and purpose are both needed in this industry particularly. I mean, passion is something that passion sort of gets you up and gets you doing a project, but purpose is the thing that helps you complete it. I think that's for me the reason you can be. It's like a sort of, passion's a very emotional kind of thing. Passion can be something that gets you excited by something. You have an idea, or you have a series or a concept or something that you want to go, great, I'm super passionate about this. I am so passionate, I'm going to stand up and start a journey doing it. But I think unless you have a purpose, a direction, you have something that you're doing, you have a meaning, there's going to be so many roadblocks, because any project that you do is going to be difficult, and there's going to be things that are going to stop you. If you don't have that purpose, there's nothing driving you to keep going with that thing that you're passionate about. So I think you need that purpose to help you complete the journey that you start, or that passion helps you start.
Yeah. Chris, what gets you through non-glamorous hard parts of your work?
I think this is a misconception about television. Television is not a glamorous line of work.
Thank you for stating that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think, oh yeah, you get to go to here, you get flown around the world and do all this sort of stuff. But no, this is a tough industry. You've got to be willing to put in 16-hour days, weeks on end, no weekends, got to give up holidays, got to give up friends' birthdays and whatever it might be. I think
it's a lot of sweats and setbacks.
It is not a glamorous industry. It can't. I mean, the stuff that you see might be award ceremonies or whatever. That's the sort of fraction of a percent that can be glamorous. But other times you're sleeping in a tent. You're eating expedition food. You're being asked to deliver projects with higher expectations and lower budgets. Again, it comes down to purpose. It comes down to what you've got to always realize why you're doing something. And the why for me is always, it comes back to, I'm trying to spread that message of curiosity. I want people to be curious about the world. And I think films and filmmaking and television and documentaries is such an amazing vehicle for taking someone's vision or art or something entertaining and packaging in a way you can put a message in there that says, no, this is actually really interesting. And you can leave people with the sort of key takeaways where they go, actually, that's put an idea in my head that I want to go and explore further. And I think that's what I try and do when things get hard in this industry, is remember why I'm doing it.
What's one thing you do that's meaningful but not enjoyable?
I guess the one that comes to mind instantly is feedback. Nobody likes getting feedback in this industry. It's really not enjoyable to have someone look at what you do with a hypercritical eye
Hmm.
and say, here are all the things of wrong that you've just spent a year doing. And you poured again, it's not glamorous. You put your heart, sweat, and tears. You've sacrificed so much. You sat in the edit for 6, 8, 10 weeks, and you send off the cut, and all you get back is, I mean, if you're lucky, you've got someone giving feedback and going, oh, this is a part I like. But usually it's like, this is wrong. We don't like this. We don't like that. Da, 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 da. So that's hard. However, I absolutely accept it's an essential and important part of the process, because you're the one that's been living this project for however long, and you can't see the wood from the trees. So these are people that are coming in and they're very good at what they do. They're obviously more senior execs and commissioners that go, these are the problems and here are some solutions, or these are the things that we see are wrong with it. Go and find some solutions. And oftentimes you may not even see that there's a problem. And so it's super important to have people giving you those notes, even though they're super painful sometimes.
In your industry, does mentorship work?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think mentorship is a huge part of this industry. And I think it's one of the only reasons that it can work sometimes. You've got to learn from someone, not just learn, but you've got to have someone that champions you sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of mentors over my time in the industry, and some have been invaluable of just boosting confidence sometimes. It's an industry where you're always self-criticizing, your self-esteem might go down, your morale might go down. So mentors are so important to say, no, like, I know it's tough now, or I know it's whatever, but you're good at what you do. Believe in what you're doing. Believe in you're good at what you're doing. You're talented. There's a reason that you're here.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. How do you know when to put the camera down?
When I'm really tired.
When there is no more juice in the
No.
batteries.
Yeah, when the batteries run out and there's no more cars to shoot. No. I'm very lucky. A lot of science films that I've made, they don't go into, let's say, hugely emotional points. I think there's multiple times. I think there have been times where people do get emotional on camera. I think that's important to just have an instinct of when to keep rolling, when not to keep rolling. I think that's it becomes an ethical question then. I think in a wider sense, a lot of directors, going back to literally what I said before, is getting tired, is that, a lot of directors have got, the only thing in their head is getting the story. And for the crew, they may have been working 10 hours or 6 hours straight without a break.
Yeah.
And a lot of directors can go, no, it's more important. We've got to get the story. But you've got to give these guys a break. Like, these cameras are heavy. They've been working long hours. They need a drink. They need food. And it can be so easy when you're in a flow and you're getting good stuff to go, no, let's keep pushing. You've got to know when you can't keep pushing, and when you've got to go, okay, great, here's a time to stop, because you've got to give these guys a break, or else they're going to be useless to you tomorrow.
Chris, have you ever regretted filming or not filming something?
I think that there's times, again, I'm very fortunate, and I'm sort of, not in a investigative journalism or something like that, where it becomes a lot more like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing. When we go out there, we usually plan to get something, and that's what we plan to get. I mean, there's been times where I've worked on shows where, the plug has been pulled, on a particular story, and you're like, oh my God, that story was so good. Like, and I was so excited to have people watch this particular story. There was a particular story I want to tell you, but I think it's still under NDA. But I think that there are times where you do regret not shooting stuff, but you just got to get past it. It's just part of the job, And I can't think of any particular examples off the top of my head, but I think that there may be actually one particular story we were shooting for a documentary recently, was a story about the longest minefield on Earth, which is in Western Sahara, I think. It's just south of Morocco. It's called the Berm. It's about 2,000, almost 2,000 miles long. It's almost as long as the U.S.-Mexican border.
Is it between Morocco and Algeria in that?
It's Western Sahara, Morocco to the north, and what's the country on the east side? I can't remember. Anyway, this was a story that it was so interesting, and we had such good access. We had access to the UN, and it was such a good story because we had access with the UN, but also the Bedouins that are living with these mines and what they do to try and they got camel farms and trying to make a living, and they know the area is mined. But we just had to drop it for safety reasons. Essentially, it's a really dangerous part of the world, and we were trying so hard to figure out ways of getting our crews there safely and ensuring we could. You can never guarantee safety on any shoot, but guarantee safety within the correct margins. And we decided in the end to drop it, and that was a shame because I knew it was going to be a great story.
And on that, when you're working or in a place like a volcano, war zone, or a minefield, where everything feels either fragile or immense, what goes through your mind?
I mean, in places where safety is really paramount, again, it comes down to that fear and the importance of the good level of fear. It just keeps you focused. And when you're on shoots, you have a task to do. There's never any downtime really on a shoot like that where no one's got nothing to do, So you're always focused on the task at hand. I think sometimes the only time where you may have a moment to, you may have a moment to think to yourself is when you're using the toilet, and the toilet may be squatting in a venting gas vent in a volcano, and your mind goes, this is a bizarre situation to find myself in right now, and you just you're looking out on this vast volcano that you're living in for a week, and you just go, I have a very strange job. I love it, but that's where my mind goes sometimes. Is just have to pinch myself to go, this is a strange job sometimes.
Chris, you told me you're not religious, but clearly you appreciate the power of nature, the human spirit, and beauty. Where do you find that kind of wonder?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been religious. I've got into science at an early age, but I find it I have such a privilege in speaking to people and writing stories and researching stories that sort of help explain how all of this stuff around us, whether it's animals or people or the human mind or space stuff, astronomy, and I find the wonder in how all of this stuff came to be. We are as far as we know, we are the only intelligent species out here.
Yeah, we are.
And the fact that how all this came to be, the sheer number of events and random occurrences and coincidences and happenings that had to happen for life to exist on the planet, let alone anything else, the evolution of humans and all these kinds of things. And we can hear the Call to Prayer in the background, so I think it's a good time for talking about that. But I think that for me, I feel humble in the sheer insignificance of my life and the lives of anyone on the planet. And I think that that's not saying that in a bad way. It's just that for me, and personally, this is my personal belief, that I just think it's so incredible. Life, you think about life has been here for billions of years. And when you think about this, the tiny snapshot of our lives, and even not just our lives, but the existence of the human race and civilization, it is just such a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction that it's so hard for the brain to even comprehend. And I love existing. I think it's great to be alive. But I also find sheer wonder in just everything, the processes of everything from how the billions and billions of neurons in our brain function, and we still don't understand how that works, to evolution, to the way that weather systems work, to the way that stars are born, And I find that it's just a such a privilege to be in a job that allows me to really get in and appreciate all that stuff, and actually go and be in those places where we can go and capture those stories as well.
And with your scientific background, have you ever wrestled with questions? Let's say one of the main questions is the creation, for example.
Do you mean creation in a biblical sense?
Yes.
I haven't, to be honest. My parents grew up. They were brought up religious, but when they became adults, they weren't religious. They taught my brother and I, as we brought up, about all of the religions, and encouraged us to study Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all the major religions, just to have an appreciation of them, and have appreciation for all the different creation stories. But for me, I think maybe just the way that I see the world, it just doesn't, for me personally, again, I have to stress this, it's my personal opinion, it has never, I guess it's evidence for me. There's not enough evidence. And I think that's where people go on faith and the power of faith and believing things, even with the lack of evidence. That's a very powerful thing for them. But for me, it's never been, I guess maybe my mind is it's not attuned to that way of thinking. And so the more I got into science, the more that I could see what the scientific evidence was there. It felt to me that was the way that everything came to be. It was logical for me, even though there are huge gaps in our scientific knowledge. What I love about science is it's always willing to admit that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And always willing to admit that there are gaps in our knowledge. We're going to redefine the model when we have more understanding. And it admits that we don't understand everything yet, but here's what we do understand. And you build a picture from that. And for some people, that picture includes a higher power, and for some people it doesn't.
Yeah. Does being in places where life and death coexist change how you see things like purpose, connection, or even randomness?
I mean, when you say life and death, do you mean in places where my crew's lives are at risk?
Yeah, absolutely. Like in situations based on your work, like a volcano, minefield, a war zone.
I don't think so. I think for me, it still always comes down to, it doesn't change. I think that, we have a finite time in which we live. We have our 80 to 100 years, however long we have. And my belief is that we're here to spend it trying our best to find happiness, whatever that happiness is defined by our own internal selves, and try and bring happiness to others and try not to do harm to others. I find that being in those places where you're pushed to your limits, whether it's a volcano or whatever, it forms a bond with people. You're allowed to, form a kinship and that, and I think that's great. But fundamentally, I feel like it gives me a more of appreciation of that, how lucky we are to be here and appreciate all these amazing, incredible spaces. I think in terms of finding patterns and meaning in things and coincidence and all that sort of stuff, I have to say, because I don't, your listeners may disagree with me, but from my working with neuroscientists and making documentaries about neuroscience, the human brain is primed for pattern recognition, for finding meaning in things that may not have meaning or may have meanings that we can't quite comprehend yet. And for me, that's what it is. It's just an evolutionary aspect of our brains to try and find an answer. We evolved to hate the unknown, quite rightly, because the unknown is scary. The unknown can have threats that we should be scared of. But yeah, I think that's for me what it is.
Thanks for sharing, Chris. And lastly, what makes you hopeful?
That's a very dangerous question in these particular recent times. But I think what keeps me hopeful is you look at the increase of how technology is being used. Technology for me is the thing that keeps me hopeful. And there are good and bad things, bad sides to technological innovation, but ultimately we have been able to extend lifespans, well beyond what evolution says we can, usually live. And we've, been able to prevent world starvation by, optimizing crops and new crop technologies and feeding people. I'm hopeful that we can continue using technology to improve things for the human race overall. And there's always going to be challenges and dangers and downsides to technology. I mean, looking at AI, things like that these days are going to provide a huge amount of challenges for people. But they also come with some benefits, So I think that the human ingenuity, the ability for humans to come up with stuff that is going to make lives better, is going to keep me hopeful.
Great. And talking about AI, what do you foresee or predict within your industry, filmmaking? Because we see some really cool, crazy stuff that we couldn't even think about 2 years ago or even 1 year. And at the speed things are going, sometimes I'm asking myself, okay, one day, let's say, be in a situation where, okay, let's go for a premiere at the cinema or in one of the streaming service where the whole thing is AI generated.
I think that that has already come. There's a Chinese film that was completely AI.
Oh, okay.
It looks really bad. It looks like really old AI because it was probably made with older Gen AI. But it's already started, Sid. We are already in that world. They've got I don't know if people have seen it, but there's an AI actor or actress that is being generated. I can't remember her name now, but we're already living in that world. Very soon that we will see complete films made with AI. And one thing that keeps me passionate about documentaries is that I believe that people will still be interested and excited to see real stories.
True.
Real things, right. And I think that is so important to keep at the heart of what we're doing, because fundamentally we're human species. We are tribal. We love hearing each other's stories, and I think people are going to get very good at telling what is artificially generated stuff and what isn't. Even though visually it'd be hard to tell, it'll lack the soul and the heart and the passion that we were talking about earlier in these projects, because there are documentary projects and even film projects. You can feel, you can literally feel when the love and the team and everyone has put their heart and soul into something. And then you can watch other projects where you kind of feel it's a little bit like disjointed and maybe things weren't working so well. And I think that the human mind has a way of comprehending these kinds of things which have love and passion in them, and are real human stories. So I think that's what I stay hopeful for. But it's really scary times. I've been part of industry seminars and stuff, seeing stuff from OpenAI. The technology that's coming through is really scary. It's going to cost jobs for a lot of people. One talk I saw recently was potentially technology that could help. The amount of times that we sit there as editors and directors in a booth, in an edit suite, going, "Oh, I just wish I had this shot," and you don't because you didn't shoot it or you ran out of time or whatever. That's not going to be the case with AI anymore. You can basically tell AI like, "Oh, here's the sequence that I have. I would like a reverse shot of this character with this and it will just build you a shot, and you just slot it in." And I think we're going to find, maybe as well as the entirely wholly AI generated films that you talked about, we're going to be finding a lot that's just AI generated but just slipped in particular places that it'll be imperceptible to a lot of viewers.
We were talking earlier about the horror movies, that it's something never clicked with me, but what always fascinated me, and I'm still to today, is science fiction movies and films, and the likes of Avatar, with this big budget, Avatar 1 and 2, big budget production. And today, what AI is capable of, is just crazy. And I keep asking myself, what's next? Having as a reference all these older productions, I mean, old, 10 plus years, and the minute those stuff, they were on screen, I was like, wow. What's your take, Chris? Should we embrace AI?
I I don't think we have a choice fundamentally. I mean, when it comes down to innovation, just it doesn't matter any kind of innovation. You can't stop it. It's just our human nature to continue to discover and innovate and try and do new things and explore. Innovation is just it's exploration by another name in
Yeah.
some ways. So it's not like we have a choice in my mind. This is coming whether we like it or not. It's just how we adapt to it is what we do have control over sometimes, and how we use it, what controls we put on it, if we can put controls on it. And like we said before, it is going to offer a lot of incredible benefits. Benefits including, not limited to the amount of data processing in pharmaceutical drugs, for example. Being able to process millions of drug combinations and molecules to find the right ones that are going to be most effective in a drug trial. That's going to leaps and bounds of advancement in medical technology, but it's going to come with some scary sides as well, So I think that, we have to try and, I guess what we can do is be prepared to embrace the good when we can and control the bad stuff when possible.
Great. You're listening to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk. For more conversations on sports leadership, faith, performance, and innovation from Sweden to the world, visit prezerosportstalk.com. Now it's time for our lightning round. Ready for speedy Q&A?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
A book that's changed the way you think.
I read The Alchemist when I was about 13, and that had a huge impact on me. It was a great book. Very short, but gets the mind thinking very, very interesting ways.
Your favorite piece of gear?
Probably my Apple AirPods. Their noise cancelling is amazing on them. Great for aircraft.
What scares you most outside your work?
I'm not a big fan of flying, believe it or not. Not particularly scared of it, but yeah, I get flight anxiety, and I deal with that. It's but it's a huge part of my work, so I just deal with it.
Coffee, tea, or something stronger?
Definitely something stronger. I'm Scottish.
Yeah, got it. Most dangerous place you've ever filmed?
Probably minefield. In some ways, minefield or volcano. I'll leave it at that. Unless you want me to elaborate.
No. Maybe for the next one. Story you haven't told yet, but want to.
That's dangerous in my industry. I don't want to give away ideas. That's always a tricky one. So I'm gonna leave it there. It's IP is important in this business.
The moment you knew you were on the right path?
Probably when I did that BBC internship. We did a shoot, and I was asked to be an extra on camera, and it was a huge amount of fun. And I thought, this is just too much fun not to do this as a job.
Worst mistake you've made on set?
Early in my career, I was a young producer, and I took the crew to the wrong airport in New York, and we had to rush very quickly to the other airport, and we just made our flight. It could have been a close one. Yeah.
Worst career advice you ever gotten?
Oh God, worst career advice.
Or maybe the best.
Best career advice. I'm drawing a blank on this one. Jeez. Worst career advice, the best career advice. Pass. I'm drawing a blank.
A film or a doc that inspired you to start?
I always remember when I was a kid, my dad showed me documentaries about volcanoes. My dad's a geologist. He showed me Nat Geo documentaries about volcanoes, and it's just stuck with me ever since.
An early morning person or a night owl?
Definitely a night owl. I hate early mornings. I'll do it when I have to, but I
And
hate
how
them.
do you start your mornings or early morning if you have to or forced to?
Uh, Probably just I'm not a tea or coffee person. Literally, when you said before, I don't drink tea
Okay.
or coffee, so I just get up, do what I have to do, get out the door, and I just focus on the job at
Mhm.
hand, and that's it.
Best way to unwind after a tough week, tough day, or a tough project?
Holiday, a
Take a
holiday
break.
in a place where I can switch off my phone and not be worried about. Ideally, at holiday, it's off grid, somewhere where my phone couldn't even ring if it wanted to.
Most misunderstood part of your work.
I think what I find a lot of people is how long it takes and how much it costs. It's much longer than you think and much more expensive than you think.
Yeah. One word your team would use to describe you.
Level headed. I'll put a hyphen in the middle, so it's one word.
What do you want to be remembered for, Chris?
I'd love to be remembered for inspiring people to find an interest in the world around them and the people around them.
And lastly, one piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
Oh my God. Stay curious. That's it. Be curious about the world, be curious about each other. Um, and I think with curiosity, it comes with respect as well. So I think that's important and sometimes is lost in modern day.
Chris, thank you very much for sharing your stories and your perspective on risk and storytelling.
Thank you so much, Sid. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, I leave you with this quote. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, from Albert Einstein. We want to thank you for joining our show. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you're here, subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. Visit prezerosportstalk.com to explore more conversations on sports, leadership, faith, performance, and innovation. From Sweden to the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.